You know, we are in Toronto and we are still in lockdown here. So this is my family, which is why they can be right behind me without having to physically distance. And we are doing this by any means necessary. You know, we have this balanced on a cardboard box, a computer balanced on a cardboard box, and we were not going to let anything stop us from making this announcement today. So we are streaming now on Instagram and Facebook because we want to share the news that I will be seeking the nomination for the Green Party to represent it in the next federal election here in Toronto Centre. Alors, je suis très fière d'annoncer que je vais chercher la nomination du Parti vert du Canada dans la circonscription de Toronto Centre. Uh, I am so excited to be doing this. And yes, I am also a little bit nervous about it as well. There is no question that there may have been some safer places to run. But at the end of the day, this is the community where my heart is. This is the community that I want to stand and fight for and be the champion for. And I am ready to take the leap that so many people did in the by-election by coming back here again and seeking to represent this community right away and in the next election. The reason that we stopped here in St. Jamestown today is because it is really emblematic of the resilience and the resourcefulness and the pride in this community. This is a part of Toronto Centre that has been particularly hard hit by the pandemic. It's a part of Toronto Centre that where 40% of the children in the last census were living in poverty, where the median income is 35% lower in other parts of the city. These are the people doing the precarious work, the essential work that has gotten us through this pandemic, and coming home to unaffordable housing that is overcrowded and spreading infection, unfortunately, through their community, so that the rates here are 3 times higher than the communities just 4 or 5 blocks away to the north in Rosedale. And so despite all of this, the community has found a way to rally together. It's found a way to take care of each other. It's created meal programs. It's created seniors programs. I'm reminded of Julie, who's a 12-year-old girl living in St. Jamestown. She is the daughter of refugees. And despite the modest means of their family, every weekend she is out in the community feeding the homeless with food that her family has prepared. And so this community is doing all that it can in order to take care of itself. It needs some help and it deserves that help. And so that is why I'm choosing to run here. We need to have someone championing this community who is able to say the things that need to be said. That this community deserves a national housing strategy that actually will protect the people in this community and give them access to adequate, affordable, dignified housing. That this community deserves finally a plan to recognize the foreign credentials of workers, because actually there's a higher level of education in St. Jamestown than on average in Canada, in Toronto. And so not having access to that talent is just wrong. And these people deserve the same opportunities as everyone else. This is the place where we have to say that a guaranteed livable income is something whose time has come, and these are the people that deserve to have that, so that they don't have to go to work when they're sick, so that they don't have to be working for a salary that is not going to take care of their families. And so as I like to say, it's an East Coast thing, but I like to say that, you know, I'm here, I'm sticking, I'm staying. I'm going to be the one to say those things. And after 27 years of Liberal representation, 18 of those years with the Liberals in government, it is enough. This community deserves better. And once again, I'm ready to offer that real representation, that real opportunity for this community to have their champion in Ottawa. Alors, c'est une communauté ici et Toronto Centre qui mérite un vrai champion, une vraie représentation, quelqu'un qui est là pour dire les choses qui doivent être dites, pour faire les choses qui doivent être faites pour sa circonscription. Alors, les gens ici, ils font tout ce qu'il faut pour protéger leur communauté. C'est les gens ici dans Saint Jamestown et les autres quartiers de notre communauté qui font des travaux essentiels, mais qui menacent leur santé. C'est la raison qu'il y a plusieurs quartiers dans cette circonscription qui souffrent des taux très élevés d'infection de COVID, même si leurs voisins, juste quatre coins, merci, quatre coins d'ici ont des taux 3 fois moins élevés qu'ici. C'est les gens qui font le travail dans nos centres de soins de longue durée. C'est les gens qui, même dans la pandémie, ils ont décidé de s'organiser pour aider leurs voisins, pour créer des programmes, des banques alimentaires, pour créer des programmes pour aider les aînés dans leur communauté. Alors, ils méritent un champion, ils méritent quelqu'un qui va le représenter fidèlement à Ottawa, et je veux être cette champion. Alors, je sais que peut-être il y a des circonscriptions un peu plus sûres pour moi, mais ce n'est pas une question de chercher une circonscription pour moi. C'est une question de chercher une communauté qui mérite une meilleure représentation, et c'est ici à Toronto Centre. Après 18 années de gouvernement libéral, 27 années d'être représenté par le Parti libéral, c'est clair qu'ils n'ont pas choisi de championner cette communauté. Et moi, aujourd'hui, je dis que je suis ici pour le faire. Je vais faire le saut avec la communauté. Je veux être le représentant. Et oui, je l'annonce ici aujourd'hui avec ma famille. Et avec ça, je suis prêt à prendre des questions s'il y a des questions.
Thank you, Ms. Paul. We will now begin with questions. One question, one follow-up. Nous allons commencer avec les questions immédiates. Une question, un suivi. Please use the raise hand feature if you wish to ask a question. Veuillez utiliser la fonction de lever la main si vous voulez poser une question. And please identify yourself and your organization.
I'm just moving with the sun here. As I said, we're doing this real, whatever it takes style. I think I'm going to move a little back just to see if that's, there we go. That's a little bit better. Okay.
We have a question from Alex Ballingall, please. Go ahead, Alex.
Yes, thanks so much. I guess you mentioned there were places that you think would have been easier, I can't remember how you phrased it, but easier places to run essentially, or more of a likelihood of winning, I guess. Can you just talk about why you think you can win in Toronto Centre this time, and why you didn't choose maybe a easier path to get into the House of Commons as leader of the Green Party?
First and foremost, it's this community. This is a community that I was born in. My mother and grandmother started their public service careers right here in this community. And I want to start my public service as a member of parliament for a community that I care about, and for a community, as I said, Alex, that deserves it. This is a community that is doing every single thing it can for itself. I have never encountered a community with more civic mindedness, with more generosity, with people of very modest means in many cases, willing to share whatever they have. It's a community that has been represented consecutively and uninterruptedly by the Liberal Party for the last 27 years. 18 of those years with the Liberals in power, and it has seen a steady decline throughout all of those years. And so I was not going to turn away, and I was incredibly gratified by the 1/3 of residents of this community who took the leap just 4 months ago and voted Green, even though the overwhelming majority of them had never voted Green before. And that was with 3 weeks. We had 3 weeks to get that campaign together. So I believe that with more time and with the work, nothing substitutes for the work, that this community is going to take the decision that they're ready to have the representation that they deserve. So that is, that's the idea. And there is no safe seat for the Greens other than the ones that we currently have. Any seat, anywhere that I ran was going to be a challenge. For me, I had to say to myself, where do I want to take that challenge up? Where do I want to make a stand? And it was, for me, it was Toronto Centre.
And just as a follow-up, in your opening remarks, obviously we're talking about the Green Party. You talked a lot about social issues in the riding, but I didn't hear you talk about climate change or environmental issues. Do you think that the pitch to the voters in Toronto has to do more with those social issues and economic issues rather than the traditional Green Party standard of climate change, environment?
Well, we always say that there is no climate justice without social justice, and no social justice without climate justice. So the two things will always go hand in hand, and we will always talk about them. When I was a candidate here in 2019, the biggest and best attended event that we held, I mean, it was standing room only, and we had over 350 people there. It was actually at capacity, was an event on the climate. It was a climate forum. This is a community, despite all of the other challenges that it faces, that is absolutely committed to climate solutions. And it is also a community, because it is so dense and because it is so urban and because it has very high concentrations of low income racialized communities. We know that these are exactly the kind of urban communities that are going to be most directly impacted by our changing climate. Already we know that this area suffers from terrible air pollution for much of the year because of the construction and the transit that comes through the community. So absolutely we'll be talking about those things. We have to remember that for people to be strong climate activists, for them to lend their voices to tackling the climate emergency, their basic needs have to be met. It's very hard to have the bandwidth to talk about or think about the climate when you're struggling to feed your family, or when you're worried about bringing COVID home from your job in a long-term care center. So, in order to help build that allyship, we need to make sure that we're talking about those things. And the Green Party always has. Every single thing that I mentioned, I have been speaking about, and I spoke about it in 2019. I spoke about it in the by-election. We are always going to talk about social issues and prioritize them.
Thank you. Christopher Reynolds from the Canadian Press has a question. One question.
Hi, Ms. Paul. Can you hear me okay?
I sure can, Chris.
Yeah, so I know that there's been some talk about how the Greens face the NDP as a really big challenger, and it's the NDP that will be the adversary from which you folks are hoping to attract voters. I'm wondering, are the Liberals just as big a challenger for you as the NDP? Are you hoping to attract Liberal voters just as much as NDP voters?
What we're not hoping, what we are doing already, what we have been doing and will always continue to do, is to offer the most progressive voice in Canadian politics. And if that is attractive to someone or someone's, whatever party they belong to, then they belong with us. So, we are not positioning ourselves in any way to snatch the votes from here or snatch the votes from there. We are talking about the same things that we have always talked about: how to complete our social safety net, especially in light of the lessons learned from this pandemic, how to create, and in the case of the pandemic, how to create a green recovery that helps us get to net zero as quickly as possible, and how to achieve and forge the most just society that we can. And so, I think that those are Canadian values. I think that those appeal to voters across the spectrum. And so we're just about that, about positive, progressive politics. And we hope that that will allow us to attract a lot of voters. And you know what? I'm going to finish with the hope. We expect that that will attract a lot of voters in the next election who see that we need a different path forward, that we cannot keep going down the same old road and expecting the same results. And we see that here in Toronto Centre. We can't keep voting for the same representation and hoping for different results, especially after all these years. And I believe that people in Toronto Centre have had enough, and they're ready for a new option. And I think that's what we saw in the by-election, when we did so well with so little time against a Liberal juggernaut.
Although I know a lot of people vote with their hearts, there are also, in a first past the post system, a lot of folks who probably are considering or might consider strategic voting. And sometimes that can result in votes that might have gone to you or to another party going to one of the two biggest ones or the two most likely to win in a particular riding. I guess I'm just wondering, are you concerned about strategic voting, siphoning off votes from Greens, especially yourself?
Well, in the case of myself, as I said, I want to be honest with people. I certainly know that that this is a risk, but it's not a reckless risk. It's really one that is I'm trying to be as brave, let's say, as the people here who took that chance, because you're right. Voting for us wherever it is in the country is generally going to mean doing something that you've never done before. It's going to mean choosing to vote for something as opposed to against something, which about a third of voters did in the last election. So we're aware of that, but I believe that the pandemic has changed things tremendously. It's changed our society, and I don't think that politics is excluded from that. So this kind of disruption is, I think, an opening for people to reconsider their priorities, to think about what kind of representation they want to see for their communities, and to vote for a party like ours that has been proposing and will continue to propose really progressive policies that, again, help us to move toward a green recovery, complete our social safety net, and forge a truly just society. Thanks, Chris.
Are there any other questions for Ms. Paul, please? Est-ce qu'il y a d'autres questions pour Madame Paul? No? Oh, yes, Alex has another question. Go ahead, Alex, please.
Might as well jump in if I can. Yeah, just you mentioned. Sorry, I was just trying to find the exact quote here. The in the writing, they need somebody who's able to say the things that need to be said. What do you mean by that?
What I mean is that I'm sure that the current MP is a lovely person. I have no reason to doubt that at all. But the fact is that when you are a member of a whip party, where you're expected to toe the party line, you just don't have the ability to say the things that need to be said in a community like this. And so the person representing this community should be able to say, we are struggling with an opioid epidemic that has claimed the lives of many of our community members. And so we need to decriminalize possession and create a safe supply. This community needs someone to say that we have lost too many members of our community to death in long-term care from COVID. And so we need national standards, we need universal long-term care, and we need to take profit out of healthcare. It needs someone to say that there are monuments in this community that are emblematic of it, and we're going to say that you can't just tear them down, and they're going to fight to make sure that the foundry doesn't get demolished, whether that is a provincial thing or not. And so any MP, any Liberal MP, is in no position to say that because their government is not saying those things. And so this community needs someone that is going to be able to say those things, that is going to be able to put them first. And as leader of the Green Party of Canada, I have no impediment and I will never hesitate to do that.
And just maybe just as a follow-up, can you talk about the importance of Ontario? Obviously, the Green seats right now are on the coasts. Yeah, I guess the coast, yeah. Mm-hmm. So in terms of having an Ontario breakthrough, was that part of the rationale here to stay in Ontario to try and get sort of a foothold in this province?
Yeah, it's time for Ontario. We've been toying around with that that slogan. I don't know if you're old enough for that one, Alex. The a place to grow, Ontario. If you remember that one, that's what we're talking about. This is a place where I really believe, and we can see that that Ontarians are responsive to our messaging, to our very positive brand of politics, which is really focused on the issues and not on hyper-partisanship. And again, the way that Greens represent their communities. And so this is something that I think that I can facilitate. I mean, I'm from Ontario. I was born here. I grew up here. And it would be wonderful to have the chance to be able to find clusters of green candidates that I can support in the next election. So yes, it's time for us to grow in Central Canada. It's time for us to build our base, and this seemed like a great chance to do that. We're in Toronto Centre. So you know, this more than anything, I want to really underline is about building the party. If I wanted to win a seat just for me and leave it at that, and if that's all that mattered, then again, perhaps, and only perhaps, there might have been safer seats. But I came into this because I really believe that Greens have the best policies and the most progressive policies, and I wanted to be in a position to support our growth, because I believe that the next election is the time for that breakthrough, and I believe that we can create a beachhead in Ontario for sure.
Thank you. Are there any other questions, please, for Ms. Paul? Est-ce qu'il y a d'autres questions pour Madame Paul, s'il vous plaît? No? Okay, well, this concludes this press conference. Ceci conclut la conférence de presse. Merci beaucoup à tout le monde. Thank you to everybody.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much.